Welcome back, or welcome for the first time, to Farm to School BC's School Garden Mentorship Program. Today we'll be focusing on a few different things, but outdoor planting, working with students. Up until this point, we've been mostly talking about planning the garden, more of logistical things. We're going to start moving more into the actual engagement piece. We're going to talk a little bit about volunteer management, getting you thinking about that, some about theft mitigations, signage in the garden. We will have a breakout like we typically do. We are going to have a giveaway, and let's get started. So as I mentioned, we will be recording. We are recording as well, and you can find that on the website at our portal page. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm presenting today from the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory and homeland of the Lekwungen peoples, which is in modern day Songhees and Esquimalt. If you'd like to, please feel free to let us know in the chat what traditional territory you're joining us from today. Your presenters, as always, are myself and Addie.
Hi.
There she is. And so, yeah, we've been with the organization for a number of years, 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer for Addie. She's a veteran. And we're going to continue to host these sessions as we move through even the summer months and into the fall when we wrap up in October. So a little bit about Farm to School BC. We are, just a second here. We are a program that brings healthy, local, and sustainable food into schools across British Columbia that provides students with hands-on learning opportunities that develop food literacy, all while strengthening the local food system and enhancing school and community connectedness. Farm to School BC is a program of the Public Health Association of BC and is supported by Province of British Columbia. And there's just a couple other programs that PHABC administers up there on the slide. And we are organized into 8 regional hubs across British Columbia, each coordinated by a local community animator and supported by a network of stakeholders. So our hubs don't encompass all of the areas within the province. They're just within these regions and the districts that you see there on the left. But we do support and try to support all regions of the province, and that is through, for example, our granting streams and through programming and educational resources such as this and other resources that you can find on our website. And so here are the animators. So if you are in one of these regions that fall within one of those school districts, you may want to get to know one of these wonderful animators, most of which are on the call here today and will help us facilitate the breakout sessions. So if you're unsure if you have an animator in your region, visit our website, look under the drop down of our team, and you'll be able to learn more, and you'll have contacts there in case you want to reach out. So depending on where you live in the province and how developed your garden is, this should be about where you are on the timeline. You have your committee, or at least a group of people working on the garden. You have a design plan. You've just started to look into building your garden. And now you're getting into that late spring, entering into the summer of growing in the garden. You've maybe made a plan, or maybe you've already started planting if you're on the coast, although it's been terribly cold this spring. But now you're starting to think about what does the future look like? Are we going to have a harvest in the spring? What does summer look like? Are we going to be able to take care of it? Do we think we're going to have a fall harvest? So this is the stage we're kind of at right now, and this is where our discussion will lie today during the session. And so here's just a quick agenda for today: crop ideas, planting with your class, which will be led by Addie. We'll do a little breakout, and we'll discuss garden tours, signage, theft, vandalism. We'll have a little giveaway and a closing. And now I will pass it over to my co-host, Addie.
Awesome, thank you. So we're hoping that Jen is going to be able to join us today. She said she would, but she's not quite on the call yet. So Jennifer Hagen works for Groundbreakers, a nonprofit in Smithers, and she and Helen have been working really hard over the last few years to support school garden programming in Smithers and at a few schools. So we'll hear from her, and she can jump in with some stories. So hopefully she'll be able to join in a few minutes here. And we have a fun giveaway for today. So we are going to give away 2 half-hour garden consultations with our very own Marcus. So you can send Marcus some pictures of your garden, and he can just walk through any issues that you're running into, help you brainstorm anything. I think this is going to be so helpful for a lot of teachers who are working and just saying, I just need something that's just for me. So we're going to do a bit of a giveaway right at the end at 4:30 today, and we'll ask you a couple of questions about the content in our workshop today, and you'll be entered. The first, I guess the first answer will win the first garden consultation, and then the second question, the first person to answer correctly will win the second garden consultation. So there'll be 2 half-hour garden, brainstorming sessions with Marcus. So it'll be super fun.
And just to add, this has to be a school within British Columbia. Just because we ran into this before with, there was a winner who was in the United States or something. It has to be a school in British Columbia.
So here we go. Let's just, everybody just do a big stretch right before we get into the content. It's been a long day. I only taught for an hour today, but somehow it seemed long. Planting with your class. I have learned many ways of not to do this. So this has been a few years of best practices and ways to do it better. So here we go. How to grow a garden with 25 tiny humans. So who has planted with your class before? I'm really curious. If you go into the reactions bottom at the bottom of the screen and click the little thumbs up sign, show me if you have planted, not personally, but with your students before. Awesome. Got a bunch of people. Great. But a lot of people haven't before, which is wonderful. So if you have, please feel free to jump in with any tidbits that you have found to be really helpful. Just feel free to unmute or write yourself in the write your ideas in the chat. Let's get into it. So before you start planting, this is what my favorite part is to do, is just go out and start working with the kids. But don't start there. Just like anything else we do in teaching, you have to plan. So figure out the answers to these questions before you're giving potatoes to all of your students and lining up at the door. So what is your budget for seeds and plants? Are you able to afford to buy some seedlings, which work really well in school gardens? Or is you have a smaller budget and you need to be buying seeds? What classes, because hopefully you're not the only one working in the garden, what classes are going to be planting what? There is not one right way to do any of these things, but we want you to be thinking about it before you're planting. So are you going to be growing all the potatoes? Somebody else is going to be growing squash, or are you going to grow some potatoes and some squash, and so are they? Again, there's no one right way to do any of these things. And who is going to take care of watering and weeding the plants from now until the end of June and into the fall, as well as during the summer, which is what our June 7th workshop will be a bit more about, is how to deal with that summer, July and August problem of not being in school. And also to be thinking about which classes are going to harvest the food and how is that food going to be eaten. So this is on our little water ripple chart here at the bottom. This is you and your colleagues figuring out the answers to these questions before you bring in your students. So just as a reminder, we have our crop planning tools on our website, so you can check them out for the 3 different zones we have in the province of what you can be harvesting in June. So of course, now we're into May, so we've missed some crops that you can be planting from seed because it's a little late to be harvesting in June. But if we go to the next slide, it is not too late for everything. So these are 6 crops that we have information for that will grow really well across the province if you plant them from seed or from seedling right now, tomorrow, next week. But it is kind of crunch time, so don't wait too long to plant these things. So you can do spinach, kale, lettuce, bok choy, pak choy, those kind of greens. If you plant it from seed, they're going to be really small, but again, that could be more about the process of growing and learning how things germinate and come up. Or if you have a budget, you can be buying seedlings, and then you're going to get a few weeks ahead on that growing, especially in our like cool spring that we've had so far. Everything is really behind. So if you have a budget, I would recommend going out and buying seedlings and getting those in the ground tomorrow. If you want to be planting things like radishes, they take 21 days to be ready. So you can plant those from seed, no problem, and have a harvest by the end of June. They're kind of fun for kids too, because they're a little bit spicy. So it's a bit of a novelty for students to be eating something a little spicy. And then peas, again, you're not going to get the whole pea, but you can eat the top of the plant. And then these are some other perennials. So if you do have a budget, we really recommend you can make your life a little easier. It doesn't have to be so hard. You can buy strawberries and rhubarb. Strawberry and rhubarb pie is iconic because they're ready at the same time. I remember when this like occurred to me a year ago that they're both ready in June. So you can be planting the strawberry and rhubarb in a part of your garden bed or incorporate it into your pollinator garden, whatever setup you have, and they'll come back every single year. So make your life easier, but be planting some perennials. Chives and mint are also really fun plants for students. The mint will spread, but you have lots of tiny hands to help you with any spreading that's going to happen. And chives are really fun if they're going to go snack on the things. Pollinators love chive flowers and mint flowers for that matter too. So these are really fun crops to grow in your school garden. So if you are going to be planting now, but harvesting in the fall, these are some crops that you can, again, here is your crop planning chart that are on our website. I'm just gonna skip through these because I feel like I talk about them all the time. Thank you. So before you're planting things for a fall harvest, you need to be thinking about what is going to happen in the summer. And it really depends on your irrigation. So if you have irrigation, it's going to make your life a lot easier, but you will still have to visit the garden at least once a week, probably twice a week. And if you don't have automatic irrigation, you're going to be needing to visit it, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. So grab a calendar, get your committee together, the other teachers who are taking care of it, and figure out, do we have capacity to do this? If you don't, that's fine. Don't be planting things for a fall harvest, or be planting things like potatoes that you can establish now that they don't really need that summer maintenance. So I know it's exciting, but you need to think about the summer. So when you're thinking about particular crops, sorry, Marcus, I'm all excited about these things. You can go to the next one. So things like tomatoes and peppers, they're super fun to grow. Everybody loves growing them, but they are a bit finicky. So they have pests and certain nutrients that they need. They need a lot of heat. They don't necessarily work really well for schools. We do have our crop cards available on them, but they need to be planted as seedlings outside right now, and they do need some care. So we have some ideas for 4 other crops that you can be planting. Can you go to the next one? These crops work really well if you're planting in early June. So you can get these established, and you can grow all of these from seed in the next couple of weeks. So plant them when you are going to be there, that you can make sure that the seeds are getting watered, that they're going to be maintained, and these crops will be harvested in the fall. But again, you need your summer plan. Hi, Jen, I see you on the call. Feel free to jump in if there's any other crops that you want to talk about.
Yeah. Sorry to be late joining you. I'm just
No problem.
absorbing it all, and I'm impressed with your graphics too, and the number of people joining us. It's great.
I just wanted to add to this slide a little tip about planting seeds at this time of year, Addie. And that is, I highly recommend planting these early in the week on a Monday or a Tuesday, so that you have that entire week to ensure you're getting out there watering. I would even say twice a day is a great. When you get there in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, although if it's wet out, it's not a big deal. But just to give that head start, and don't plant them before a long weekend either, especially if it's planning to be very sunny, because that can ruin your germination.
Excellent.
That's a good point. I just put the link in the chat for the page with all of these crop cards on there. So now that you have a plan, you have everybody is going to do what, you know what crops are going in, you have maybe an idea of a summer maintenance. If not, come join us on June 7th, 3 weeks, not our regular 4 weeks. So now you can plant with your students. But again, don't line them up at the door and send them out with packages of seeds, because it's all just going to be a hot mess. So let's not do that. Let's get into some ideas of how you can do this productively. So all of these things are skills that we have to teach our students, just like we do anything else. And I fall into this all the time. But if we think about gardening as a set of skills that we need to teach our students, let's introduce them, let's practice them, and before you get to the point where things need to go really well. So we have clear expectations of what the behavior looks like in the garden. It's not recess. Just because we're going outside, it's still part of our classroom. So if you have some clear zones, what you're doing, this is how we walk on a pathway. We're not jumping over garden beds. We are walking through the space carefully. We are not planting, stepping on plants, making our teaching students the expected behavior and being really clear about them up front. And then, of course, reinforcing that behavior as we go through. So having zones, practicing a garden tour, it's really fun way to have introduce other people to the garden tour later. So the first time you go into a garden, have it be super fun. Let the kids be snacking and eating and have it be a positive place. So part of that is having routines, just like you do for PE, right? You go to the gym and you say, you know what to do. What do? We do 2 laps, we run around and we sit down in a circle in the middle of the gym. Students, do the same thing for a garden. You can run and skip and jump and hop all the way to the garden gate, but when we get there, we are walking calmly, we are taking deep breaths and using calm bodies when we move into the garden space. So the same things that you're doing for anything else, use those teacher lessons in the garden. Another idea is to think about activities to do in the garden. It doesn't always have to be gardening. Go in and play in the space, doing some read alouds, do some journaling, do some writing and art and science and math outside. Have a nice cup of tea. Whatever it is that you do, have the garden be a really positive space. And that's going to help the behaviors of when you are actually planting and using the garden. Jen, is there anything that you kind of want to jump in? Share any ideas?
Yeah, I like it. I like the expectations of behavior and setting up. It is a calm space, and I always appreciate it when we've had surplus dirt or a garden box that's just designated just for digging, because, like you said, they need to be able to move and use the gross motor skills and enjoy just feeling the dirt without it being hindered by the process of just seed planting. So that's an excellent way to get the shovels out in just a dirt box, garden box designated just for digging, and let them just do that. And also then they can practice digging their troughs for doing the seeds, and then they can move into the garden bed where the seeds are going to be planted after they've had a chance to dig, if they're rotating through. I always like to have, myself included, the idea in my head is whether I'm looking for the process to be the learning experience, or do we want the product? So do you want the salad and the radishes at the end of June, first and foremost, or do you want to have the students experience the process of feeling the dirt, putting the lines out, looking at the seeds, planting the seeds meticulously, because there's value just in the process, and it doesn't have to necessarily be done perfectly as per the seed package instructions. And you might get 50% germination, and that's okay. And I think that's really the value of a garden as well as the product. And it may be that you have process as number one, and then you go in and you just throw a few extra seeds in at the end of the day, if you have that kind of time. It doesn't even take that much time, or just to neaten it up. just if you're concerned about getting just that full harvest of the garden space. But the process is really important. And small groups is so valuable. We've come to learn in the Smithers Bulkley Valley district that we really find the gardens to be a calming place when you have 3 or 4 students around the garden box at a time. So bringing them out from the class in small groups, working with your education assistants for those students that particularly do need that one-on-one. It's such a valuable time to just meticulously, that I say meticulously, but it shouldn't be necessarily considered that, to plant seeds with students to be peaceful. So that is the ideal, is if you can work with your EAs to break up your class and send students out in small groups, then they get, of course, an ideal more one-on-one experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. So part of those small groups that you can be doing is when you are bringing small groups of students out to the garden, thinking about, like just what you were saying, practicing those skills that you want to teach them. So I was thinking through, kind of essential garden skills, and watering, it's really hard to do. I think my 4-year-old is like almost getting it, that we have to do it every single year. We're repeating things just like any other skills that we're teaching students. Watering takes a lot of practice. Some crops can handle a little more excess than the others, but generally plants are pretty tough. Weeding is another skill. So if you're practicing weeding, it's really hard to do. If students aren't familiar with what the tops of the plants look like, you can be taking some flagging tape for things that maybe are potatoes or tomatoes, that the tops all kind of look similar. You can put some flagging tape around your crops, and then students will know to weed around them. If it doesn't look like this, then it's a weed. But again, those are things that you will need to supervise for a little while until your students are more comfortable with identifying what is a weed and what is the crop that we're looking for. And then it's hard too, because in each row, the crop looks different. So it's a little tricky for all of us, myself included. When you're planting, again, you're supervising those things. You're practicing the planting. Maybe you planted a whole bunch of extra lettuce and you don't really care if those, those lettuces get sacrificed. You have some extra things that you're letting the students, and it's more about that process, not the product, that you have some extra things that students can actually plant things. But you're not too worried about your harvest because you have a backup plan, because we always have backup plans, right, as teachers. And then harvesting is lots of practicing as well. So those are the 4 skills that I've been thinking about. If there's anything else, let us know in the chat that you've noticed if you've planted with students before. What are some things that you really need to explicitly teach, model, practice for your students? And as always, we're learning alongside the students. Every time we do this, we're going to get better and better and better. So start today. Well, tomorrow. It's late now. So when you are planting, have stations, do it in small groups. The first time I did this, I just handed everybody a seed package and it was all just chaos. Nothing got planted where I want. So I'm not going to do that ever again. But when you have stations, you have more control. So if you think of the stations, so here, the top 2, planting seeds and watering, those are the 2 that you either need to supervise or make sure that your students have some explicit instruction on how to do it. The other things that you can be doing are digging, like Jen mentioned. Maybe you have a part of the garden that they can just dig and play and have trucks and is a dinosaur garden or whatever. They can be doing some weeding, a scavenger hunt. Spec has an awesome spring scavenger hunt you can print off and have the students look for. And that can be something they can do every week as well. They can be doing some literacy, doing some journaling, art, tasting, snacking on those chives, whatever it is that students can kind of do independently. And use your EA if you have them. Let's have more adults watching things. Maybe you can leave some students in the classroom, whatever it is that works for you and your class and your comfort level in these things.
Can I jump in with some other ones that
that'd be awesome.
Find quite effective is often there's cement or paved areas nearby garden beds and chalk drawings of garden beds and having the students maybe look through seed catalogs while they're outside and drawing the chalk jar gardens where they actually, you draw the same size of the garden box you're planting, and they can design what they're going to plant in there by using chalk. And we find bringing buckets of different types of soils. Like I bring sand, I bring clay, I bring compost in different buckets, and I have empty buckets. And so if their students aren't planting, they're creating their own soil by finding the right mixture between compost, sand, and clay. And that's a great one for getting their hands dirty and really feeling what making soil is like. And then we also have the students, if you have, let's say, a garden box, so you have 4 students along one side and then their partner on the other side, and you're putting string across to mark where the row is going to be, so that there can be part of that process too of spacing out where the rows are going to be and putting the string between the 2 partners, and then they plant to the middle of the box as far as they can reach, because often the students cannot reach, well, most of us can't reach a full 3 or 4 feet across anyways. So they're all part of that process. So there's actually, without too much prep at all, there's actually a fair amount you can still have them doing outside, so that the whole class can be outside at once without it feeling like you're trying to have a panicky situation. And then
Yeah, awesome. That's a great idea. So you mentioned string as part of the planting station. So when you are actually planting, you're ready for getting things into the garden, you're going to head outside with your seeds and your seedlings, whatever it is that you're planting with. I find seed packages really hard to get the seeds out of unless you're pouring it into your hand. So I find muffin tins work really well, or ramekins, something that's large and shallow that students can just grab a couple of seeds in. You're not over planting things. And then string, pencils, ruler, a trough, and of course signs, because people need to know what went in. And if you are planting there and so is another class, let's be super clear on where seeds are growing, because it's really hard to tell. And that's another advantage of seedlings, because instantly they're there already. So you don't need to worry about that anybody's going to get confused of where things are getting planted.
And that's another station, is that the students can be creating the signs or painting a rock or creating some kind of a fixture that can go in alongside with the garden bed to show that it's planted. I mean, sometimes if you don't have a chance to do that, I mean, the signs are good, but you have row covers, especially as northern gardeners, row covers are so good, and it helps tell the whole school something is planted here, because you have the blanket on top of it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And you can go to the next slide, Marcus. And that'll also give the seeds, they won't dry out as much, and they'll keep them a little bit warmer.
It's a good investment.
Yeah. Row covers come in very handy for lots of different things, no matter where you are in the province. So again, if you're preparing the space, you can put the string. If you're doing rows or grid, if you're doing square foot gardening, for younger grades, if you're going to be doing potatoes or onion starts or something, you can dig the row so that they can just plop them in, or lay out all your seedlings in where you want them to go, and they can easily plant them. The pencil trick works really well for how deep your seeds to go, just the depth of the eraser. Not that any of my erasers in my classroom have any, but this one seems to, just about this deep. And then after planting, covering the area with row covers or anything, or some sort of clear signage that something's in there. And watering using a hose. Make sure that you're watering it that day. Plants really need to get watered as soon as they're planted, and seeds especially, something with a nice, think of the rain falling onto the seed. Nothing super pressurized. So how do you deal with any planting mistakes that are happening, folks who have done planting before? What if your students planted it all wrong? What do you do? Maybe Jen, you can share a story while we're waiting for folks to
yeah,
share in the chat.
one garden that we would rely on for a summer camp experience, and that was often the nerve-wracking part of it, of planting it and knowing if it's going to bear fruit come the summer months. And so that's where having seedlings, whether the seedlings are started as part of a class project, or whether you're a school PAC, or you have a PAC has a budget to offer to purchase seedlings, that's always handy to throw in afterwards. And also to teach kids how to thin. And if let's say often seeds are, a clump is grown here and nothing's grown over here, is to thin and transplant. And that's another valuable skill. And that's one that, again, where I feel like if the EAs at your school are on board, it can be like, just as they might take their student outside and just do a little bit of that sort of more mindful work of transplanting, weeding, watering, to include that as one of the activities, is to spread things out.
Awesome. Okay, so it looks like we have some ideas. Becca goes through and replants them correctly. Awesome. There are no mistakes, only lessons. That's a nice idea, Piper. Thank you. Especially in gardening. Uh-oh, that didn't quite go how I thought. Yeah, Kristen uses small groups. C'est la vie. Yes, we say that lots in gardening, don't we? Oh, well, we'll figure it out. Unpack how it went and might not work the way you hoped. For sure. It's all good. It will learn something from it. The students still understand. Learn about thinning. You can always fix it. It's all good. Awesome. All right. So we just have so if you're going to be doing some art or writing station, again, you can be doing some journaling, drawing. Watercolors are always super fun. If you're not going to be assessing what other students are doing other than your planting, then let them go have fun. Here's some paint. Go have at her. Literacy is always really fun in the garden as well. Inviting students to use loose parts, creating stories with them, using some story stones, doing a read aloud. If you have a picture book that kind of focuses on what you want students to learn about. I love this book. Thinking about dirt, maybe they're looking for worms in other parts of the garden and introducing them to your garden beds. You can find a picture book for the younger grades and the older ones. I find my grade 8s like picture books as well, of what you want them to focus on that day, especially for the other stations. So there's lots of fun you can have. It doesn't always have to be about gardening. And you can even drink some tea. This was one of Jen and Helen's ideas from a workshop we did a couple of years ago, that just go outside in the garden and have some tea.
Yeah, so we've got about 15 or so minutes left, and we're going to just walk through the remainder of the topics and then do our little giveaway at the end. So as we mentioned before, we will be touching more on this at our next session regarding volunteers and how they might impact summer maintenance and so on. But I just wanted to go through a few things for you to be thinking about at this point in time around volunteer management. So, firstly, you want to kind of map out the tasks that might be needed over the summer months and whether or not your staff or committee are going to be able to support those. And so when we think of volunteer, I think of also at the school itself, but we kind of are talking a little bit about like community volunteer management. So you kind of want to map that out and ask yourself, do these tasks, the help that we're looking for, does it require any specific skills? And if it does, you want to make sure to mention that when you reach out and communicate through your newsletters, etc. So one way you could do that is through creating a sign-up sheet. And so there's a good website called signup.com, and that allows you to just kind of fill out all these different tasks and dates, and people just go in and kind of fill it in. And so that's a useful tool for doing that, especially if you've got a lot of different shifts and you don't have a regular schedule. So just check that out. Obviously, promoting through your communication channels of your school is a great way once you're organized with what kind of help you need. Be clear about the expectations regarding the harvest in the garden. So there can be tensions around this sometimes. That people who are volunteering might want to be taking a certain amount home. And so you'll just want to either plant in according, or sometimes you might set up a bed that you kind of are like, oh, you guys get this bed and you can grow whatever you like in it and you can harvest from it. But just be clear that we're really trying to grow this for the students when they return, et cetera, if harvest is a big concern at your garden. So have some group sessions with all your volunteers, whoever that is, early on, just to make sure everybody's comfortable in the garden. Determine whether they need gloves or other tools. You might want to add that into your budget just to make sure they feel comfortable, because not everyone has those things. And if it goes over the summer, check in throughout the year to see how things are going. I think it's really great to offer a basic training for all volunteers in the late spring. So if one of you has that extra skills, or you know somebody who can come in, it's great to provide a little bit of that training. And that training is also includes like a meet and greet, how to access the garden, sharing all your contacts with one another, giving them the code to the gate and all these different things, watering details. And it's also nice to pair people up. Some people don't mind coming, especially if it's a real quick task, like their only job is to come and hit the garden with water once or twice a week, then that's not going to matter. But maybe you have these specific sessions that happen on Saturdays where people come and you're there for an hour or whatever, and a group session, so that it's got a little bit more of a community feel to it. Obviously, give thanks to whoever is doing that, and sometimes it's nice to give a gift or some sort of recognition. If you have attracted and managed volunteers in your school garden, just put a little thumbs up in there. And if there's anyone who's had really good experience, and if Jen's still on the call and wants to speak to this, would be happy to hear a quick, we've got like about 2 minutes or 3 minutes at this point, if anybody wants to share out an example. So just go ahead and raise your hand down in the bottom with reactions, or if Jen's on the call, or any of the animators also, if they'd like to share. I'll just pause for a moment to see. Let me know, Addie, if you see any hands coming up. And if not, I can always move on.
We've had a best experience with volunteers is to start off with something that you enjoy doing the most, and then they sort of feel that energy, and like for example, like we chose that the noon hour garden club, where you're not trying to necessarily get a certain product or lesson objective accomplished, or that's not heavy in the classroom management, but that kind of experience is a really good one to start with the volunteers. And especially, I think ones where you see some quick results, like transplants, and the students love that too, where you're transplanting and there's the flower, and then wow, and like doesn't take long for the garden to sort of become, especially if you're including flowers, to become a real spectacular place. And so bring the volunteers in with those opportunities step first.
Thanks, Jen. And Claudia, one quick one as well, please.
Yeah, very specific. I know some schools that have been found volunteers in the community surrounding the school, or grandparents or parents during summertime. So they kind of negotiate the space. They can grant an abet where the volunteers can grow whatever they want. And at the same time, they can take care of the garden during the summertime when nobody is around. I think that this is a win-win relationship that you can build, especially during summer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Jen and Claudia. Yeah, one of the best ones I've ever seen in which volunteers have been supportive of a garden was actually where school garden sort of had that nook or that section that was kind of this community garden, and they actually hosted community garden sessions where a small group of, it was mostly the parents of the school, came and they essentially managed their own garden plots, but then would water and do basic tending of the garden throughout the summer. And that was the sole maintenance throughout the summer. Yeah, so that went on for a number of years when I was engaged with that garden. So great. Okay, so garden tours actually are a great way to draw in volunteers and get people aware of the school garden. So they can be held in the late spring or the early fall. Obviously, in the fall is the time of the harvest, so you can kind of call it a harvest party. It's great for raising the visibility of your garden, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and connecting your school community. It also allows the students to show off their work and can really surprise you in the ways in which students who you think might not be that engaged with the garden, when it comes time to show the parents the garden or show their siblings the garden, they'll really glow with pride. So this is something that I really feel strongly about. Typically they happen, after school when parents are arriving to pick up the kids. We set out snacks, maybe have maps of the garden, allow parents to harvest some veggies. So we'll have little baggies and things. Great opportunity for capturing pictures. And as I mentioned before, finding volunteers. Yeah, this is just a picture here of us doing one. It was a fall harvest party, and the kids were kind of all around their tea that they were growing mint tea in the garden. Just a little considering of tagging in a seedling sale if you do a spring version of this, as we've talked in some of our other workshops, and any other sort of events that might be happening are a great way to tie in the garden tours at the school level if there's other PAC meetings, things like that. So make sure to get lots of pictures, and I just kind of wanted to show this one that came from a pretty robust harvest party that we had at a school. And this girl here is actually on a pedal powered blender making smoothies from the garden. So it had like I wish you could see it, but there was actually like a smoothie machine on the back of the bike, and she would pedal and it would spin the blade. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, signage in the garden. So this is a big one, and all of these things are tying into how you're communicating out to the public, and the ways in which that this can also help for mitigating theft and different things along those lines. So signage in the garden can be useful in a number of ways. It can communicate rules, the history of the garden, helps to identify plants, zones, connects the community and telling a story, adds a personal touch from students, brings art into the garden, and you can also partner with art teachers, which is also fun to do. It showcases your sponsors, helps with management of the garden, and better connects students and staff to the space. So before entering the garden, it can be important, as Addie was talking about before, sort of stopping at the gate. And I have seen this done very effectively before entering, just to kind of remind, what are the rules and guiding principles well in the garden space. And I think I've seen successful examples of teachers who draft these so-called rules or best practices with the students' input, allow them to have the input, and then allow them to help design and paint the signs. So that's just a great way to also, anyone who's coming and going, you can have that right at the beginning at the garden at the main gate. So maps can also be a great way for students to develop a sense of belonging in the garden, but are also great for communication and co-management amongst classes, like what we talked about before. Laying the netting over the garden is one way of communicating that there's something growing in there. You can also do that with having the map and updating the map regularly. So you can draft a map and place it somewhere in the garden for reference, usually inward facing in the garden, but you can also print off and laminate this. And so I just showed this very basic looking map, but why it was important was the idea that the garden could change its purposes from year to year. So you could actually, you have these green boxes and different things, you could paint over them and then write on the map whatever is going to be in that box for this year, in case it's changing classes or it's changing its purpose. So that's just something that I think is really useful for students, and then definitely for volunteers. Placing signs in beds to identify what is happening is obviously really good. So you just see a few different signs here. Just a little tip about the Land of the Giant sign there. Obviously it was for squash and different things of that nature. Notice how the stake comes up a little bit higher there. That's just a little tip. It's good for when you're hammering the stake down into the garden. If it's flush with the top of the sign, you end up knocking the sign right off. So it's a little tip, but I always painted the signs white back then because it would make the wood last a lot longer, and they would kind of stand out a little bit more. As far as the paint used on here, it's acrylic, but you do have to do some sort of coating over top or it will wash away. Just another example of different signs here. These are made of like corrugated plastic and metal. So these do last a long time. You can get them printed at places like Staples or any print shops. And they're nice for just kind of recognizing different areas of the garden and what the purposes are of it. These are, they're kind of hard to tell, but they're kind of more plant-specific signs at this section, informative plant signs. So they're actually saying what has been planted here, what its purposes are, maybe what its Latin name is, when you can harvest it, different things along these lines. And activity-based signs as well. So these are something you can set up inside the garden for students to engage with. So they'll come in and they will use this to help them navigate some sort of activity in the garden. So that can be a fun thing to do as well. So on our website, we created a document called Learning from the Land Toolkit, and it's a great resource that focuses on connections to Indigenous plants and pedagogies within, oh, my little guy just came home. Connections to Indigenous plants and pedagogies. And within this resource, we have an excellent lesson plan and activity that you can download on developing signage in your garden. And so basically it's right here, and it starts with researching plant names. In this case, they're Indigenous plant names, and then moves on into lesson plans and activities for how to actually construct signs and how to do it with students, which includes materials, the overview, the time needed, etc. And if again, if you go to our website, you can, it's a large document, the Learning from the Land Toolkit, and it's really focused a lot on Indigenous plants. But this lesson plan is at the bottom here, plant signage, and you can download just that portion of the activities. So it's a useful little thing if you want just some guidance in moving forward and actually constructing some basic signs to go out into the garden. So deterring theft and vandalism, we talked a little bit about this in some of our other workshops, but obviously the location of your garden is a big deterrent. If it's hidden back in to an area where not a lot of people are able to see it, that's when, you know, more examples of kind of unruly behavior can happen in the garden. If you have the opportunity to place a garden in a high visible area in which local community is keeping an eye on the garden, it is a great strategy. This was a garden that was in a very high visible area on a corner of 2 streets, and it didn't have fencing. It didn't need it because it was in an urban area, but it had a huge buy-in and a lot of volunteers and et cetera. So building relationships with your neighbors, letting them know what the garden is about, letting them know about garden activities, dropping off little gifts, dried herbs or garlic, inviting them to the party events or tours, is a great way to start getting a lot more eyes on the garden. So if you are experiencing theft or vandalism, inform them to keep an eye on the garden. Additionally, let you know, if it's getting really extreme and like the damages are, you know, costing you a lot of money, you may want to be looking to notify police or even notify the local media. So when it comes to theft, it can be literally, you know, people are coming and taking a hose that's left out, or maybe you left your tools out by accident. But it can also just be, you know, coming and taking fruit and different things, or harvesting your plants. Another way to detract from vandalism and theft is through the communication we've been talking about. So just an image of just a kind of livening up this shed, telling the story of your garden. Sheds tend to be a site of vandalism, so maybe adding this so that people know that this is for kids, this is kids, and the energy has gone into it from students, and it can work to deter people from wanting to, you know, cause harm to your space. Obviously, if it's a fenced garden, locking the gate and shed is important. Consider a sign on the gate door to remind people, especially volunteers, to lock up at the end of the day. And as we mentioned, using a combination lock rather than a key lock is better for ease of use. It's much easier to text a code than to always be buying new keys for everybody and chasing them to get it back. Theft can also be done by animals, and that can be pretty massive at times, especially for berries and things along those lines. So just a couple slides here. Oh my goodness. So this is just some simple bird netting over the sections of the garden here that is really useful just at that time of year when the berries are starting to come out, including, just hold on one sec. CDs hanging from the branches also can help to spook birds as well.
So excited to see Dad.
Sorry about that. Animal theft for birds, a couple other strategies. One is scarecrow in the garden. Another is the bird feeder. Setting up a bird feeder away from the garden is a good way, because if you know, if what is the issue is that birds are hungry, then you can feed them. A couple other just basic things for animal theft is putting on motion detected sprinklers. They can be really useful if something just keeps coming around and digging up your garden. Obviously, these sprays of animal scents can be useful. And there's a lot of other things out there, but I guess really just to point out that these things can happen. It's not always necessarily a bad thing. It can be a learning experience. For example, in one school garden that I was in, cats kept coming into the garden. And so what we ended up doing is planting away from it a bit of catnip. And they actually quit coming because they were so interested in going over near the catnip, and all they wanted to do was eat a little bit and dig around. So we set up this additional garden over at the side that had the catnip in there. So I'll pass it back to Addie for the next slides.
So our next, I put an Eventbrite registration. If you are interested in learning more, if you are going to be planting things in your gardens for the summertime, thinking about summer maintenance, and we're going to have a little bit of a celebration, asking people to share some photos of their gardens, and that's again going to be in 3 weeks on June 7th. So you can check out that Eventbrite link to sign up if you aren't coming yet. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And we also have some summer dates. So they're tentative, but if you would like kind of some support, so we're not doing this alone. If you want to come join us, Marcus and I are just going to be, it's going to be a more casual. We're not going to have a presentation or anything, but just kind of checking in on July 12th and then August 23rd. So we're going to keep the Tuesday, but we're going to move to 10 a.m. because we don't need to do it in the middle of the afternoon. So we're going to be doing a bit of a check-in, maybe finding some farmers, master gardeners, that kind of thing. So just a heads up, those are coming down. All right, so we are going to do our giveaways now. Let me just queue up the question. All right, so fingers over the chat. Number 1, the first person to get this one right is going to win a garden consultation with our very own Marcus Law. What is the name of the Indigenous Garden Toolkit that Farm to School BC produced? What is the name of the toolkit? You can go on our website if you missed it. It's a very good toolkit, if I do say so myself. Yay, Megan got it. Learning from the Land Toolkit. That's right. All right, Megan, you won the first one. And number 2, what is one purpose for signage in the garden? What is one purpose for signage in the garden? Vandalism. Yep. Young, you got it. Vandalism for sure. Knowing where things are, rules of conduct. All great ones. All right. So Yang and Megan, if you could send Marcus an email, marcus.lob@farmtoschoolbc.ca, and he will find a time to connect with both of you. Yay! Congratulations. So again, of course, if you need any support, please connect with your animators. I'm just going to put in the chat as well, if you could fill out the feedback survey and let us know how things were, if there was anything you were hoping for that we didn't get a chance to cover, if there what you thought was great, what we need to work on, please let us know. All right, so you can head on to our website to check in with your local animator. If you need some more support, we can head to the next slide. And Marcus and I are always here if you have any questions. And yes, we have lots of information on our website if you need anything else. So thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate all of your time here today. If you would like to chat for a couple of minutes, we're just going to kind of officially end the call, stop the recording. And yeah, thank you everyone for your time today. We hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, you can head off